Since 2004, over 700 local governments and organizations around the world have assumed the principles and the values of the Agenda 21 for Culture and are working with it in a variety of ways. And the document is also, since 2004, promoted by United Cities and Local Governments, which is an international network of local and regional democratic governments with presence in all continents of the world, that somehow is advocating for this recognition of the nexus between culture, sustainable development, and the local level. Basically, we often illustrate this paradigm that we're proposing with this notion that it's necessary to move from a vision of sustainable development based on 3 dimensions to one that includes 4 and that puts culture at the same level of importance as the other dimensions. And if we had to summarize this in a set of key messages or key ideas, we would say that, first of all, culture is an essential dimension of sustainable development, that we believe that cultural rights, including the right to take part in cultural life, are a fundamental aspect of legitimacy for cultural policies that should be concerned with a set of intrinsic values or a set of core values of cultural action, such as access and participation for everyone, as well as the respect and recognition of aspects like heritage or heritages in plural, diversity and creativity as elements that should be a core concern of cultural policy, that it is inevitable for sustainable development to combine different aspects and dimensions, and that particularly at local level, the synergy and the exploration of the common ground between the cultural, the economic, the social, and the environmental is inevitable and should be explored in the policies and strategies that are implemented, that local governments have a fundamental role in bringing together the partners and developing policies, but that in practice, the exploration of the cultural dimension of sustainable development should involve partnerships with all the relevant stakeholders that contribute to cultural life, including, as we've been seeing in the course of the conference, through developing appropriate governance frameworks that involve the public, the private, and the civil society sectors. And that because very often the challenges that are experienced by cities in different parts of the world have certain similarities, there is much to be learned by fostering networking and peer learning among cities and local governments in different countries. And that's basically what the Agenda 21 for Culture has been advocating since 2004. 1 decade later, there was a number of reflections within the Committee on Culture of UCLG and other partners that it was time for the Agenda 21 for Culture to be, on the one hand, updated, on the other hand, to be made more operational, to clarify what the effective implications of the Agenda 21 for Culture could be for those stakeholders that wanted to make this link between culture and sustainable development effective. And in 2005, a new document was adopted that we call Culture 21 Actions that presents 100 specific actions that can be adopted in cities to make this cultural dimension of sustainable development effective. And those 100 actions are grouped under 9 topics or commitments. We start with cultural rights as the basis for the rest of the approaches. Then we move on to what can be the core of traditional cultural policies, including the concern with heritage, diversity, and creativity. And then we explore the links with a range of other areas of social interest in cities, including the link between culture and education, the environment, economy, social inclusion, urban planning and public space, and information and knowledge. And in the last section, we address the need for a governance that recognizes the different actors and that fosters collaboration among them. When I say that Culture 21 Actions proposes 100 actions, that's 100 measures, 100 processes that can take place in cities, but that do not rely exclusively on local governments. In practice, many of these actions may need to be adopted by artists and cultural professionals, by universities, by the private sector, by civil society organizations, as well as definitely by local governments, but also by other levels of government that might have an impact on what happens in cities. So basically, we try to assess what takes place in cities, but which is actually the responsibility of many different actors. And on the basis of Culture 21 Actions, we have developed a range of peer learning programs that basically aim to accompany and support cities that want to assess where they are and then develop approaches to policy that on the one hand address the key areas of culture and sustainable development, and on the other hand try to build better approaches to governance by bringing together the different partners. And in particular, among these learning programs is Pilot Cities, which is the program we are presenting here today that currently involves about 30 cities in different parts of the world and that has two branches. One that is global, and that mainly involves cities in Latin America as well as some in Asia. As well as one Pilot Cities program for Europe that we carry out in partnership with Culture Action Europe, and of which Rijeka as well as Timisoara and Lisbon are part. Pilot Cities, we present it as a learning process that starts with self-assessment and then aims to lead to policy innovation and transfer of practices among cities. It has a strong component of citizen participation and fostering local networking. It also aims to foster peer learning among cities, and definitely the learning dimension is something that is present in a variety of ways. So it involves learning among cities, but also learning of new ways of doing within cities, among public, private and civil society actors, as well as between the different departments or units of local governments that don't always work together. So that's also one of the elements in which we're placing emphasis. There's a component of awareness raising and communication, because we are aware that this is a long-term process and it's important to make it well known. And throughout the process, there's a range of experts as well as UCLG and Culture Action Europe that will be providing support. This is roughly the methodology that is followed in the program. The standard methodology for Pilot Cities lasts about 2.5 years, although this can be adapted to local specificities as well as local needs. Very often cities, either because of other local initiatives or because this is linked to the development of a cultural strategy or other processes, might actually adapt that length to their specific circumstances. But basically, this starts with an exercise of self-assessment, out of which a work program is designed and then implemented. There's instances of exchange with other participating cities, and this leads to a final conference in which a new assessment takes place and some recommendations for follow-up work formulated. The expected results of the program, the adoption of new policy measures in accordance with the needs and the challenges that have been identified locally, the strengthening of models of governance of culture and new partnerships within cities, increased connection between the different cities that are participating in the program, a contribution and a strengthening of the understanding and the awareness of how culture plays a role in quality of life and sustainable development at local level, external visibility of the good practices that are identified locally, as well as a number of documents that are produced and which are basically made available on the website of the program. This is one of the results that appears at the beginning of each of the processes, what we call a radar, or the result of a self-assessment of where each city stands. We don't want to compare cities or to rank cities. We do provide a comparison with the global panel that we carried out a couple of years ago, and basically where we asked people in different parts of the world where they thought that the cities they knew best were with regard to these 9 topics, and then we use that as a benchmark for cities to compare themselves with. And in any case, each city has a sufficient degree of self-criticism, particularly when you bring a diverse range of people to identify their strengths and weaknesses and work on that basis. And then, as I was mentioning, there's a database of good practices that is also available on our website, which features examples from different cities, including pilot cities. I also left there some flyers and posters about these, as well as about some other of our initiatives. And basically, I think I'll leave it here, because basically wanted to give this initial background and context of the program. And we'll now give the floor to Diana first, and then Alexandra to illustrate this better, how this is operating in practice. And then afterwards, if anyone has questions, we can also discuss them, and we'll be happy to explain more. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordi. Good evening. My name is Diana Donawell, and I represent the Municipality of Timisoara from Romania. I will speak you about our city's participation in Pilot City program. We decided to join this program last year. And we consider this program represents for our city an important support for the program Timisoara 2021, which is, of course, a priority program of our city in this moment. And from the beginning, it has been intended to complement and extend the 2 major cultural strategic documents of our city. It is the long-term cultural strategy for the period 2014-2024. Our city is the first city in Romania which adopted such a cultural strategy. And the program Timisoara 2021, European Capital of Culture. I will give you some very concrete information about the activities already developed in our city in the framework of this project. The activities we already developed at the end of last year and during this year was a preparatory visit done by Jordi and the designated expert for our city, Ivor Davis. They came in December and they meet the representative of several cultural institutions and organizations from our city to start an assessment of the main cultural assets of our city, to have to create a complete image of what happens in our cities. And in the framework of the first activity, it was an initial self-assessment workshop organized this year in April. And also we included the visit of several cultural institutions and organizations during the same week. And also this year we organized a public event to present this project to a broader public. Initially it was established, in fact the program establishes the public event has to be organized at the end of this week when it's organized the self-assessment, but due to some local issues, organizational issues, we decided to split and organize it separately. And also there are several activities to organize until the end of this project. We have to, until the end of this year, we have to design a work program. We are in this stage right now. And we already established to host the pilot cities in February or March 2018. As you can see, there are several other activities, and there is a degree of flexibility. We already established something for the activity 3.3, and the others follows to be organized. I will detail a little what happened during the preparatory visit. The aim was to allow the representatives of UCLG and the Culture Action Europe experts to get knowledge of a number of venues, sites, and projects useful for the analysis of the local cultural context. They visited the main cultural institutions and organizations, the Romanian National Theatre, the German State Theatre, and the Hungarian State Theatre. I had to mention the Romanian National Theatre is financed by the Ministry of Culture from Romania, and the German and Hungarian state theatres are financed by the city, because we have an important ethnic communities, and we are supporting their involvement in the cultural life of the city. Also, there have been visited some cultural centers, House of Arts Cultural Center, which is financed by the County Council, and an independent cultural center, Ambasada. In the visits were included also some private cultural foundations, very active in the cultural life of the city. Also the Philharmonic Orchestra, financed by the city, and the Intercultural Institute, which is dealing mostly with intercultural issues, migrant. As you can see, the visits were split in 3 stages. Each time the experts were in our city, we included new visits according to the program. We also organized meetings with city representatives, in fact with the deputy mayors in charge of cultural and social affairs, several city departments, urban planning, social affairs, environment, and of course the representatives of the Association Timisoara 2021. In April, we organized one-day workshop for the self-assessment of the city's policies in the areas of culture and sustainable development. This workshop is a key element of the Activity 1 of Pilot Cities program. The structure of the workshop was established, in fact, by Pilot Cities program, and in fact, all the methodology. The purpose was to facilitate the design of a work program that will enable the city to build on its strengths and to address some of the identified weaknesses next year and maybe and beyond. The workshop was facilitated by several experts. The designated expert from UCLG, Ivor Davis, which is a lead expert on behalf of Agenda 21 for Culture, Jordi and Catherine Cullen, experts from UCLG Culture Committee. The participants were representatives of different departments of the municipality, from cultural, social assistance, urban planning, environment, and also representatives of several cultural and educational institutions, for instance, the Polytechnica University in Timisoara, which is dealt with the IT issues, and also the University of Agricultural Sciences, which has some departments dealing with environment issues. And also a lot of representatives from diverse organizations in the area of culture, social assistance, tourism, and also there were present the representatives of several ethnic minorities from our city. It's very important to choose well the participants and to have from all these fields linked to the thematic areas of Agenda 21 for Culture, because during the workshop, if you don't have in each group, because the participants were split in 3 working groups, maybe there is not enough knowledge in the group to discuss and to analyze, to debate on diverse actions from the 100 actions included in the document. And then there will be a gap if... The basis for the self-assessment workshop was a template which Jordi presented you. 9 thematic areas, in fact 9 commitments linked to all. These documents was adopted, as Jordi already told you, by the Committee on Culture from UCLG. As I told you, the participants were divided into 3 thematic groups. And they examined and assessed the current status in Timisoara with regard to each of the 9 thematic areas of the document. And they were comprised in a self-assessment guide, which was translated into Romanian to facilitate more the works. But in reality, all participants happened to speak English, and it was much easier for the expert present, because in each group was an expert to facilitate and explain the methodology and how things happen and what they expect from the participants. And I will not explain too much what happens, because during the workshop this is explained by the experts, and it's quite easy to understand right there before the workshop starts, on where it's starting, what happens and in which way. All the 100 actions were analyzed one by one, and the participants gave a score. Sometimes people agreed on some issues. Sometimes they disagreed, and this issued a lot of debates, but finally they had to arrive to a common conclusion and give a score for to rank to give a score which is agreed by all the participants in the group. And this exercise revealed several strengths and the weaknesses of the city in the cultural field. And all during the workshops, it was in each group was a rapporteur which noted some observations from the discussions, and they prepared a document. Also, they marked the scores for each activity, and they prepared a document which was leaded to the expert. And on this basis, he prepared a report named Radar 1. It was, in fact, the workshop outcome, and this will be useful to choose some measures for the work program which follows to be developed. In the reports contains also some conclusions of the workshop, also names the strengths identified, the weaknesses, the good practices, some common issues to be addressed, and the most important specific measures to be adopted in the work program. Also, the workshop revealed a synergy between Pilot Cities Europe program and the Timisoara 2021. Many of the strengths and the weaknesses highlighted during the workshop were already identified and mentioned in the city's cultural strategy and in Timisoara 2021 bid book. And these thematic connections of the cultural strategies with the program are not surprising, as the document was conceived according to the objectives of Agenda 21 for culture. The connections with Agenda 21 for culture reveal in many of the cultural strategies core principles. I just listed them, I will not read them. And also the strategies thematic axes are provide an important basis for Agenda 21 for culture and also the program Timisoara 2021. I listed also the strengths identified, the conclusions identified by the workshop. And just and the weaknesses also. I will not read them. It's maybe not the case right now. Just okay. Also, during the workshop were identified several good practices. I will name one of them. The fact that our bid book includes projects aimed at fostering the participation of all categories of citizens in cultural practices. This was perceived as a good practice. And several others, different organizations and from our cities offer good practices models to be followed. And also several common issues we have to address them. And maybe among these common issues would be selected some of them, and among the other measures proposed by the project to develop or to propose some activities to improve the weaknesses. And I also listed the specific measures to be adopted. In fact, one of them is the creation of a cultural department within the municipality to deal more with the implementation of, and the evaluation of the cultural strategy, and also after the program Timisoara 2001 finishes to go further with some of the elements and another set of specific measures. I can say that all the participants were very interested in this workshop, and the reaction was more than positive, and they are willing to involve in the next stages of the projects, this program, because and we selected a group of 6 people which will be involved closer in these measures has to be developed, but not all of them will be developed, only a part of them, some good practices, some strengths, and some weaknesses will be further developed. But right now we have to choose among them which are the most appropriate for our city. Even this workshop revealed many measures which are included in Timisoara 2021 bid book. This program don't replicate, in fact, this bid book. And nor the cultural strategy. Its role is to support and enhance these 2 strategic documents of the city, and to emphasize the strengths that we can build on and the weaknesses we have to address. In fact, its role is to help us to select and to analyze and select the most suitable, sustainable measures beyond the year 2021 and the year 2014, when the 2 strategic documents which will be implemented until then, and to have some very, I don't know what to say, sustainable measures for the future. What will be done to last as long as possible, not to finish in 2022 or in 2024. Thank you very much. And if there are questions, we will be very glad to answer. Thank you. Can we try this?
Okay, so I don't know, for those who have been to Lisbon, I think nowadays everyone will agree that it has a great cultural dynamics and an alive ecosystem, cultural agents, national, municipal venues, including artists, cultural agents, audiences, foundations, and other agents. But this wasn't always the case in regards to cultural policies. We started very late because we had a dictatorship until '76, and then only in the '90s was it possible to start cultural policies in Portugal and, in this case, in Lisbon. The current executive and the Deputy Mayor for Culture is in her third mandate. She started in 2009 and just recently renovated with the elections in October. She will continue to be the Deputy Mayor. And it was during this period that we decided to join the Pilot Cities program in 2015 for three main reasons. One, because during the crisis, it wasn't possible to participate in any international network. It was just for the difficulty of traveling, and to be in an international network, to be active, you really need to travel and have the resources to do so. So that was one of the reasons, because Lisbon also wants to be a cosmopolitan, international, with an international vocation. And this was really important for us, and we believe in the narrative that the UCLG Culture Committee regarding the culture, looking at culture as the fourth pillar of sustainable development. And Agenda 21 for Culture provides a very clear and practical framework for the implementation of cultural policies. So we decided to join the Pilot Cities program, and we really face it as a learning process. On one hand, for the assimilation of these issues by the decision makers, by the staff of the municipality, and for the internal qualification of the municipality, the people who work in culture. This on one hand. Also to create political awareness for the multi-dimensional role of culture. Because it's very important to articulate the vertical and the horizontal dimensions of our activity. Sorry. So this is just. And for the methodology we used, like Timisoara, we started actually with the desk analysis. We got a team together just to make a portrait of the city, analyze historically and politically the national framework and the municipal, the local framework of the cultural policies during our history. And this has been really helpful, not only for the Pilot Cities program, but this is a tool that we have been using a lot in the advocacy of our work. And then we had a preliminary visit, where the most important thing was that we called all the deputy mayors from the other areas. Of course, this was just a meeting, and so I think it takes a long time, but to involve them from the beginning was very important. Then we had the first workshop the first workshop, like in Timisoara, we involved 27 external stakeholders, and it was very interesting. We are very careful to choose them because we wanted as much diversity as possible, and it worked really well. And we decided to have an internal workshop because only 27 was very few, and we felt the need to get the message across to the people who are working with us in the municipality. So we had an internal workshop with the people who every day organize the events, who analyze the applications for subventions, for instance, and from all the departments, from the urban planning, from the parks and gardens department, from all areas. Here you can see the radar of the first workshop, the external, and in this one, actually, in this one, there's the comparison of the internal and the external, and it's very, very similar. In fact, the internal, the workshop with the internal stakeholders is sometimes harsher than the one with the external workshop. As strong points, we identified cultural equality and social inclusion, cultural rights and cultural heritage, diversity and creativity. And there's the weak points: culture and environment, culture and education, and culture and governance for culture. But this was very important to involve everyone. Then it was followed by a public event where we gathered around 200 people from the cultural sector, and we organized it in focus groups. And it was already linked with one of the pilot measures, the first one that we were certain that we wanted to include in the Pilot Cities program, which was the strategies for culture. We had a first exercise in 2009, and most of its measures were already in place. And we wanted to make a diagnosis and revise the strategies of 2009. So this was already the beginning, a first public event linking Agenda 21 for Culture and the strategies for Culture 2017. The next step was a peer learning visit to Buenos Aires. We decided to visit a leading city instead of another pilot city. In terms of scale, of course, Buenos Aires is much Buenos Aires is much bigger, but it was very interesting because from the examples we saw there, we could learn both from the things that were similar to us, as well as the things that don't have anything to do with this. It's very, very useful. And it was also a moment when the team could really think about these issues and about the work plan without the everyday concerns that we have, and we just focus on this work plan. So these are okay. After the peer learning visit, we had to work on to decide the work plan, and we decided on 4 pilot measures. The work plan to design the work plan was very difficult because in the beginning we wanted to do very idealistic things and very big things, very big projects, and in the end, we realized that we are already doing many projects that are aligned and that implement the commitments of the Agenda 21 for Culture. We are already doing that. So what we had to do was to have smaller pilot projects and then try to link everything together. So the strategies for culture was one of the pilot measures. This was, of course, something that we wanted to do. But then the second one was already being thought of, and we decided to include this in the Pilot Cities project. Just going back a little, in the strategies for culture, of course, Agenda 21 was the basis for the revision of the strategies. The Resources Office is a place for cultural agents where they can go for assistance about mobility, about consulting on law, consulting, accounting, consulting, spaces for rehearsals, information about subventions, help in writing the applications, just a service to capacitate the agents. This is still the photos of before, and we rehabilitated a building, and it works as a shop. It's a public office, so you can go there and just make an appointment, and I need help to review a contract, and just make an appointment for that. And the last one is a pilot measure linked with urban planning. It's there's an urban planning project which is called a neighborhood in each square. A square in each neighborhood. Sorry. And we are going to add the cultural dimension to this project, starting with one square. And this is the only one which is still not finished. Sorry, I skipped one. Sorry. So there are 4 pilot measures. This is one in the Marvilla Library. It's a new library, and it's a learning project for single parents families, and it's for a 5-month project. Every Saturday, a family with 10 families. And they give them tools for them to replicate at home, learning processes and reading and storytelling. And I think it has worked really well. But the problem, this project, we need to reevaluate it because we didn't reach the families that we wanted to. We wanted to work with adolescent parents, and this was not possible. So we tried to reach the local stakeholders, but still there's a lot of work to be done, and we are aware that we didn't have the results that we wanted. So this is the... Okay. So I will quickly just give 2 examples of not pilot measures, but projects that I think embody the values of the Agenda 21 for Culture. One is the Marvilla Library, which is placed. It was built on purpose for this area. It's a new library, and we tried to involve all the community since the beginning, from the construction of the building itself until and the program. Before the library was concluded, people could visit and accompany all the construction process. And now, in terms of programming, it's not just a place where you can go to read, but you can stay, seek help, and most of the programs are linked with the interests of the population. And I think this embodies all these values, because we try to link the local, the national, and the international. For example, we had a festival, street art festival, was held in this neighborhood this year. And we invited international artists who worked alongside with people from the neighborhoods in painting the murals. And of course, this has a big media attention and many visitors that usually don't go to this part of the city, and many tourists who nowadays visit the city and are very interested in this kind of street art. And so another project is the Ibero-American Capital of Culture, which is being held throughout the year. And I also think that it embodies the values of Agenda 21, because we involved all the venues, and we did not multiply the program of the city, which is already very intense. We tried to channel the programs of all the venues, municipal and others, to this theme, and adding density to the programs and disseminating it in the territory. I think it's what Agenda 21 is about. So we, for instance, have this program which is in the libraries, storytell, and this is illustration. We invited many artists to work with children in the libraries. This is a conference program in a theater about ecology. And this is the poster for the Design Museum, an exhibition with Ibero-American artists. This is a project about the testimonies of slavery, involving 40 venues, museums, archives, associations in Lisbon, more than 40. And this is a theater play about dictatorship in Chile. So I will just finish by saying what are our conclusions now that we are in the final stage of this program. The main thing is that, of course, doing the pilot cities program alone it takes a long time. It's not by finalizing the pilot cities program. You have to continue doing the same projects because it really takes a long time. Of course, that we were already undertaking many projects that incorporate these commitments, but we need to communicate them in a way that people understand. When I say people, the local authorities and public, in a way that they understand that the program has a strategy behind it and serves certain values. And the main thing is that Agenda 21 is a basis for consensus. It's very important because in local governance, the shifting of mandates of executives sometimes stops projects. And if you have a basis of consensus like Agenda 21, you don't go back to where you were before. So even if pilot cities doesn't go on, the values will continue. And if you incorporate in the municipal organization, it will continue. So I think that's all. I have other ideas, but I think mainly that's it.
So thank you very much, Diana and Alexandra, for illustrating very precisely what the Pilot Cities program means effectively in cities and how in Timisoara and Lisbon this is being put in place. And I believe we still have some minutes so that if anyone has any question, you want us to explain something else or want to share experiences from your cities, that could be the moment to do it. Yeah, Levin.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Very useful tool for the cities. What are the other competencies? You mentioned the space collaboration. What other collaborations do you use?
Yeah. Well, it's not easy. We tried and we weren't successful in some of them. We tried to collaborate with the education department. The first idea for the pilot measure was to have the school passport, which is a project in education, and to add value to that because we believe it doesn't work very well. And it was impossible because most departments want to have the initiative in their project or our project, and it's very difficult to make the link. Of course, everyone is very receptive to working together, but when it's time to be practical, there are many obstacles. We are starting to work, for instance, in the culture in economy. We are working with a structure, Centro de Inovação da Moraria. You know it. It's a hub for creative industries, and we have the resources office that I was talking about, and we are linking both of them. And we're just starting now, but I think it's going to be very successful because there's a great will to collaborate. And so the creative hub, the creative industries hub, have a certain kinds of services. We have another. We have different languages, and we don't want to alienate the cultural agents that go to one and the industry, the creative industries that go to the other, but we maybe can link, and ones can use the services of the others, and we're just slowly trying to. This is one example, but and I have more, but I think the main thing is it's very difficult. It's very difficult. I think you need to find one stakeholder, someone who wants to work with you, and then grab that opportunity, I think.
I would just like to comment on this. I think this situation is very something that's a big obstacle, and just convincing people that cultural questions and social questions, not just questions, market questions, are difficult. Just as an illustration for today's presentation, we invited people from other departments, Mr. Rijeka from City Hall, but unfortunately there's people from the Department of Culture. And we are aware of this, that it will take time, and you can, is without people from urban planning department, education, entrepreneurship, etc., are just, not valuable. Or they are valuable to a certain point, applicable to a certain point. So that's definitely a job to be done.
Yes. Well, the strategies for culture address that issue, and there are several measures in the strategies to address the problem of governance. In the workshop, to reach consensus, it was very interesting because I don't know if it was clear that the way it works is that you have, for each commitment, you have like 10, 11, 10 to 12 actions. And you have to give a score from 1 to 9 to this action. And it has to be consensual. So it generates a big debate. And these actions are very practical. For instance, one example is there a document recognizing cultural rights recognized by the municipality? This is very, very specific. And even this one generated a discussion. From that, there's a part, the facilitator would take notes, and from these notes, these observations that the stakeholders would require to be noted down, most of the ideas for the work plan and for the strategies also came from there. One of them was to have a cultural a council. We don't have it in Lisbon, but and this came out in all the sessions. So there were things that were repeated in all the sessions, regardless of if it was culture and environment, culture and cultural rights, culture and economy, and it was repeated. And so that was one of the things that we analyzed. And this cultural committee is something that we want to do, but in a different format, not so formal. We are going to try to do a forum which will include the territorial, the thematic, and the institutional levels, and not. It has to be to change from time to time. To have a panel, a permanent panel, and then this panel will be responsible for. This is an idea that we are working on, but this panel would be responsible for creating debate instead of themselves creating contents. So this is one of the ideas to address this issue.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few ideas on the basis of what you're reflecting. First, the issue that both Diana and now Alexandra were referring to of the workshop, and definitely the need to Rijeka consensus, which basically, I mean, what the initial self-assessment workshop aims to do is to bring together different voices and generate a conversation that leads to a certain degree of understanding, of common understanding of where the city stands, and base that on actual evidence. So it's not reflecting on very general statements, it's actually providing evidence of, well, the city is strong in this area or is weak in this area because this and this and this, and we somehow provide a certain reference of what would be an ideal situation and what is a weak situation to help facilitate. But basically what you realize is that through the workshop, the text of Culture 21 Action somehow gains life by people appropriating it and bringing it closer to their specific context, and somehow trying to generate a common language in a joint conversation among different actors. So I think that's one of the interesting elements of launching the process. Related to these, something else that I wanted to highlight is basically the openness that this requires from cities. I mean, the fact that, and you've seen this in both presentations, how there needs to be an effort of cities to recognize its own weaknesses. I mean, starting with local governments being very, very open about basically what the city might need to improve, and seeing this as a learning process, and one which, in order to make progress, will necessarily require dialogue with other actors and involving them and making sure that at all stages in the process they can be involved. Something that relates to the notion of the cross-departmental collaboration is, and Diana and Alexandra were illustrating this, when we talk about the relation between culture and education, for instance, it's understanding that for that to work, it needs to be both ways. So that, for instance, when we explore culture and education, we demand that the service of education, or the department in charge of education within the city, should take into account cultural factors and make sure that there is learning about cultural contents and cultural practices included in the curriculum, as well as in non-formal educational settings for different age groups. But it's also about making sure that the cultural actors, museums, theaters, NGOs, etc., they also develop educational activities themselves. So it's about understanding that this is not only culture asking to be recognized by other departments, it's also for the cultural department and cultural actors to recognize that they hold the responsibility towards other aims of the city. And then something else that I wanted to highlight, Alexandra was mentioning that Lisbon carried out its peer learning activity to Buenos Aires. And I think that's an interesting point, because very often from a European perspective, we're more used to receiving people from other continents trying to learn from Europe. And let's say being bold to say, well, actually, we would like to go to Buenos Aires and learn from the cultural policies of Buenos Aires. I think it's quite a significant step, and it's also very much in line with the ideas of the Agenda 21 for Culture, of saying, well, actually, we have much to learn from different parts of the world. And then, of course, there's also several European cities that have gone to visit Lisbon, because Lisbon is also doing very well. But this sort of multilateral and multi-directional approach to the learning process, both within the city and, let's say, at international level, is something that we are trying to promote. Okay, all right. So, right, okay, yeah. So we'll finish. I mean, if anyone has any any other questions, we'll be around so we can discuss them later. Just a final point to say that, as Irena mentioned in the beginning, the city of Rijeka is joining pilot cities, and we're planning to start the implementation, the initial activities, including the self-assessment workshop in 2018, so in a few months. And we're very much looking forward to this being a positive process for everyone involved. So thank you very much for your attendance, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And thanks Diana and Alexandra as well for your presentation.